All right, so I'm up here in Harriman State Park, and I've hiked quite a bit out into these woods here, looking for the old Spanish silver mine. And I've come up to this ridge, and I think I've spotted it way up there. I see a dark spot on the ridge. I'm gonna have to climb up this hill. So as the story goes, there was a strange ship that sailed up the Hudson. The local people didn't recognize the build of the ship. It looked different from what they were used to seeing. And there was a crew of men that was offloaded on the shore somewhere just south of here. And they weren't seen again till the fall. They were carrying these heavy sacks out of the woods back to the awaiting ship. And this carried on for a couple years until one day at the tavern, one of the strange men was confronted by a local resident and finally asked, "What is it that you're hauling out of the hill?" And half jokingly, the strange man said, silver ore. And the legend of the silver mine kind of took root from there. But even stranger, there was supposedly a quarrel where two men were killed, and the locals went up to investigate it after the Spaniards had departed. And they found kind of a rudimentary cabin built somewhere probably right down where I'm standing at this very point, overlooking the silver mine. And in the cabin they found the body of two of the Spanish men that were killed. And that's the story. This supposedly took place in the early 1700s. Okay. Oh wow, look at this. It is an adit. Wow, it's a short adit. Okay, so I made it up here into the mine, and I took a look around. I do not see any ore that I could potentially call a silver ore. Definitely traces of magnetite, but nothing that looks similar to some of the other silver mines that I've seen over on the banks of the Hudson near Sing Sing. So I took a look around the mine for any clues, and I did find two very large drill marks. So these are like 2-inch drill marks, and one of them is right there, and the other one's behind me there. And these are definitely modern. So this is after the late 1870s when pneumatic drills were in common use, all the way up until maybe even the early 20th century. I don't think that this mine dates back to colonial times. There really isn't a vein that would be profitable to mine, being such a remote site. It just doesn't add up. It does certainly have a mysterious location. It's not something you would find just by walking through the woods. I don't feel like this mine would date to the early 1700s. I mean, it's possible that it was mined on a small scale and then remined later with pneumatic tools, which is very common. But there isn't a rich enough vein to justify mining this with such primitive tools and being in such a remote location at the time. So one other legend that's associated with this mine is that it's the hiding place of Captain Kidd's treasure. And all across New England and New York and New Jersey, there's these stories of Captain Kidd's treasure being hidden in caves or buried on beaches. And it is true that he did bury treasure, and he did live in New York City, which is roughly 50 miles south of here. So there's one story that has Captain Kidd being pursued up the Hudson, and just to the east of where I am now is Dunderberg Mountain, and where the Hudson comes through between the two mountains is called the Devil's Race, and it was a really navigationally difficult place for ships to sail through to continue up the Hudson. And I believe, as the story goes, his ship was damaged, and he may have scuttled it right past the Devil's Race, and then took off into these hills and buried the remaining treasure. And we do know that sometime, I believe in the mid-1800s, a treasure hunter actually created like a cofferdam on the Hudson, pumped it out, and tried to seek out the ship of Captain Kidd. And there were some stories of cannons being found and brought up, but this may have also been a scam where he was collecting money from investors and trying to basically scam investors. But it's just interesting how there's these stories that are associated with this remote little hole in the side of this hill that was probably just a magnetite prospect. All right, so I found my LiDAR anomaly here, and it definitely is some sort of pit or trench. I mean, it could even be an adit. It's kind of going into the hillside here. This looks like tailings. It's hard to tell with the snow. So I made it up to the top of the hill. I'm above the silver mine here, and this is completely surreal. You could see right over my left shoulder the New York City skyline, and it just shows you how close this site is to New York City. So you can see behind me the Tappan Sea, which is this large open body of water, really called a sea, and the Tappans were a tribe of Native Americans. And then just beyond that is the Devil's Race, the entrance into the Narrows beyond Dunderberg Mountain, where Captain Kidd was said to have scuttled his ship. So it's a really interesting perspective from here. You can see how close everything is. Captain Kidd would have lived in New York City, the skyline seen right back there, and this would have been familiar territory for him to have hid any sort of treasure. But it just kind of fits in with this mysterious feel that the Hudson Highlands has. There's legends of goblins, and there's Dwerg, the lord of the Dunderberg Mountain. The Dunderberg Mountain is just over there, and all sorts of strange tales and mysterious stories. There's the Headless Horseman just south of here near the Tappan Sea. There's all sorts of mysteries in these mountains, and it's just suiting that this little hole on the side of the hill that's so remote and difficult to get to has stories related to it. I think it would actually be unusual if there were no stories associated with this remote little adit here on the hillside in the Hudson Highlands.